This was for President Biden. Speaking to sources close to his family, some of his longtime associates, he has been at Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, at his beach home all weekend, often alone because he is recovering from COVID, coughing as he makes phone calls and speaks with his aides. He never wanted to get out until even late last night. He was telling his closest friends, "I can beat Trump. I can do this." But he saw the writing on the wall politically, all of the pressure, and he was at this place that has been a retreat for him, as Senator Coons told you earlier today, Rehoboth Beach. It's where he's gone for the past 50 years after personal tragedy, political humiliation. It's always back to Delaware, and that's where he is tonight. The most momentous decision he has ever made in a long and storied political career. He did it relatively alone with his family and his closest aides at the beach, thinking about history, his legacy, and the future of the Democratic Party.
Robert Costa, thank you. Scott McFarland, we have heard from Democrats tonight saying that Kamala Harris is the perfect person as a former prosecutor to lay out for the American people the case against Donald Trump. Where does that stand?
Yeah, he's going back to court. This wild campaign is taking us right back to the courthouse. Listen to what's coming up in just the next few weeks. September 18th, potentially sentencing for Donald Trump in Manhattan for those dozens of felonies he was convicted of. August, early August, that federal criminal election conspiracy case goes back to the court in Washington, D.C. Could hear some new evidence from Jack Smith. And all the while, Jack Smith's going to try to resuscitate that classified documents case, which was dismissed on Monday.
So much still ahead. Margaret Brennan, what's next for Kamala Harris? If she becomes the Democratic nominee, this will be historic as the first woman of color at the top of any presidential ticket. But she's got a way to go before she gets that nomination.
She does. And, you know, I've traveled with the vice president. I've interviewed her a number of times. One of the criticisms of her is that she's not a typical retail politician. She's a prosecutor. If you give her a mission, she can deliver, and she can deliver that message in a strong way. It's not the glad handing that you see there. And as a California politician, didn't necessarily have to reach across the aisle very often. Those things are going to come up. You're going to hear criticisms of her. You will hear about her portfolio. She has been frustrated that her job was to solve the root causes of migration. In other words, persuade people not to travel to the United States. Her job wasn't securing the U.S. border. That's going to be an attack line, trying to package it as that. She's been charged by President Biden to do things like build alliances in Asia. I traveled with her to Indonesia, where she was doing that. She's spent a lot of time on some of these foreign policy issues, certainly just alliance maintenance. We'll probably hear more from her in a way that characterizes her as that strong commander-in-chief. That's something she will have to persuade male voters of as well.
And what both sides agree is the most important presidential election in a generation. Thanks to all of you.
He had been under intense pressure from Democratic leadership to drop his bid for re-election after a poor performance in his first debate with Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump. 2 days ago, Friday, the president said he was looking forward to getting back on the campaign trail. Democratic Party leaders had planned to hold a virtual roll call next month. The president and vice president spoke several times today before the announcement. That's according to a person who spoke anonymously. And then just before 1 o'clock this afternoon, the president released this statement saying, "While it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for my term." The president also said he will address the nation later this week. Now, almost immediately after his announcement, the president endorsed Kamala Harris for the Democratic nomination. There was an emergency meeting of senior Democratic National Committee members, and we have a live picture from the vice president's residence in Washington, D.C. She has not spoken publicly, but Harris did release a statement saying, in part, "I am honored to have the president's endorsement, and my intention is to earn and win this nomination." If Harris does end up on the top of the ticket, the question is, who would be her running mate? Here are some of the possible picks being bandied about, including Illinois Governor JB Pritzker, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, California Governor Gavin Newsom, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, Maryland Governor Wes Moore, and Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, plus Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, and Georgia Senator Raphael Warnock also in the conversation. We have a team of reporters on this breaking story looking at what happens next and how it will affect us here in Illinois. We want to begin with Jermont Terry outside the governor's mansion on the Gold Coast. And Jermont, no sign of him today.
No sign yet, but we do know the governor is here at his home in the Gold Coast, Joe. But it's not clear what talks or who specifically he has communicated with since news broke that the president was suspending his campaign. As you mentioned, Governor Pritzker is on the list of potential VP candidates. While people in Illinois know Pritzker, on the national scene, his name recognition is not high. As he serves his second term, the governor has been someone those in the party kept an eye on. He spoke out about biases of anti-DEI bills, pushing back on book bans about black history and LGBTQ rights, and the governor has been a huge supporter of abortion rights. In recent weeks, the governor continued to back President Biden following that not-so-stellar debate back in June. And tonight, Pritzker, like so many Democrats, is thanking the president for thinking of the better good of the Democratic Party by bowing out. But publicly supporting the president, we cannot forget that the governor was caught on hot mic acknowledging, quote, "This does not look good," when mentioning Mr. Biden's staying power.
We're just going to keep fighting. I don't know what to say. You know, I gotta do what we have to do. I don't like where we are, but I honestly think that the president's doing a fine job of raising money. You've seen all the money that they've raised online for the Biden-Harris campaign.
Now, the governor released a statement thanking President Biden, but pressing forward in the fight to beat Donald Trump. It reads in part, "As we extend our gratitude to President Biden and reflect on his many accomplishments, we must not ignore the threat posed by Donald Trump's potential return to the White House. I will work every day to ensure that he does not win in November." But missing from the governor's statement, nothing about the VP Harris nominee and nothing about his potential interest in becoming the VP bid. Tonight at 10, Democrats weigh in, Democratic posters weigh in why the Harris-Pritzker ticket could be so beneficial to the Democratic Party. Reporting live, Jermont Terry, CBS News, Chicago.
Jermont, thanks very much. Let's bring in Dave Savini now. Dave's been talking with some Democratic leaders in Illinois. What are you hearing?
Joe, there are all kinds of ideas forming about who might be Harris's vice president, but she has to get nominated first. I spoke with two congressmen today who say they believe the party will be unified and Kamala Harris will get selected. We'll start with Congressman Mike Quigley, who had been vocal about urging Biden to step out of the election.
I think the biggest news story of the year is that somebody in D.C. can keep a secret. There's no way that they made that decision and get it already in the last 24 hours, probably they knew the last 3 days. All kidding aside, you know, I think it speaks volumes for the president what a selfless act this was.
You were the first Democratic politician from Illinois to say he needed to step down.
I was a painful decision for me because I respect the president so much.
I see that one of the names that's being floated out there for a vice president candidate would be Governor Pritzker.
That would be great. He's ready to roll. He's an extraordinary governor, and he'd be a great candidate for vice president. We're so far ahead of ourselves here. You know, we've got to get this nominee officially as our nominee.
I can't thank him enough for his service, but also for his directional integrity in terms of endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris.
Are you confident that Vice President Harris will get the support of enough of the delegates?
I can't determine what's going to happen. I support her efforts to get it unequivocally.
Both Congressman Danny Davis and Congressman Quigley believe the party will eventually unite on Harris. That could happen through a special delegate vote before the Democratic convention or at the convention itself, Joe.
Well, I mean, the process to get here was sort of a slow drip, but now quickly today, there were several Democratic congressmen who have coalesced around Harris.
And they believe she could do it. She's going to have the war chest. She's going to have the money. Quigley even believes in some of the swing states she might do better than Biden might have done.
On certain issues,
certain
he
issues,
thinks?
yeah. Especially with abortion being such a big topic.
All right.
Sure.
Dave, thanks very much. Former president and Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump almost immediately took to social media to criticize President Biden for withdrawing from the race. He said, in part, crooked Joe Biden was not fit to run for president and is certainly not fit to serve, and never was. He only attained the position of president by lies, fake news, and not leaving his basement. We will suffer greatly because of his presidency, but we will remedy the damage he has done very quickly. That coming from the former president on social media today. The challenges were stacking up for President Biden, from polling to donor money drying up. I talked with CBS Chicago political analyst Lori Lightfoot late this afternoon. The former Chicago mayor said the path forward for Biden disappeared. Mayor, what a day. Are you surprised?
You know, I'm not really surprised at this point. It's been a slow but steady drip and evaporation of support. And I think when the news was leaked that Speaker Emeritus Pelosi had weighed in, and then some suggestion that indirectly former President Obama had weighed in, I think the writing was on the wall. But it obviously a highly personal, highly emotional decision that only one person can make. But I do think that there's a level of enthusiasm out there that I'm seeing for the candidacy of Vice President Harris, but the process going forward has yet to be revealed. There's no time for a primary. I've seen commentators talk about that. That's just not realistic. There's got to be something that feels like not an anointment, but a process of choice by now, at this point, party leadership, delegates who have been elected from their various geographies. But we need to move on about the business as Democrats of defeating Donald Trump.
The Clintons have endorsed Kamala Harris. The Obamas have not. Nancy Pelosi has not. It seems there are some who are sort of keeping their powder dry, if you will, to see what happens. Do you think someone steps up to challenge the vice president?
Look, I think there's a lot of people who would like to step up and challenge her. They've made no secret of that. But here's the practical reality, which I've been saying for the last couple of weeks. So Biden steps down, then what? The fact of the matter is the money that's been raised by Biden-Harris can only be used by Kamala Harris. The very complicated question of how do you get on the ballot in all these states across the country to be viable? I think that's an open question, and I think it's one that she definitely will have an advantage in. Although, again, I'm not an expert in election law and certainly not getting on ballots across the state, but that's going to be a real challenge for anybody who says, oh, well, call on me and skip over the vice president. I think the other practical matter, Joe, is, because the polls have shown it consistently over the last many cycles, the most consistent voting bloc for the Democratic Party are Black women. So explain to us how it is that you skip over the sitting Black female vice president and go to someone else. I think that's going to be a really tough call. And the truth of the matter is, this last couple of weeks has been a total distraction on the part of the Democratic Party. We are just weeks away from the convention, and we've got to get it together and be unified heading into that convention, not waiting. I don't think this is going to be something that will play itself out on the convention floor, but as a practical matter, if the Democrats cannot demonstrate to the American voters that they have a leader who is strong, who is proven, and ready to take on the challenges of the world, Donald Trump wins.
What about her vice presidential pick? That seems to be key for many. Obviously, we hear that Josh Shapiro, Pennsylvania, the governor there, would obviously help with Pennsylvania, possibly Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan. There's talk of Andy Beshear in Kentucky. There's also talk of JB Pritzker possibly. Who do you think ends up sort of in position A and B in that discussion?
Well, look, I think it's too early to know. And frankly, none of those people that you've listed have been tested at a national level. And that's the great risk. People don't win or lose elections on the basis of who their vice presidential pick is. But I think in this moment, particularly because of the reasons we talked about, a Black female candidate, which would be breaking the ultimate of glass ceilings, I think you've got to pick somebody who's going to be a huge value add, looking at governors in swing states like Pennsylvania, like Michigan. I've heard a lot of talk about Andy Beshear, who is a two-term governor in a traditionally red state. I think there's a lot of factors there. I think it's also going to be determinative, and let's not underestimate the power of the donors out there, who the donors are going to rally behind. But most of these names are unknown on the national stage. It's really going to be about, if it's Kamala Harris, who's our nominee, and I hope it is, it's really going to be about her vision, her articulation, and picking someone that really fills in the gaps for her and helps her speak to that audience of independents and moderates who have been reluctant to embrace the Democratic ticket so far.
They got Biden to step aside as many wanted. Do you think it would be dangerous to now head up another hill for another battle with Kamala Harris?
Well, I don't see how that battle really plays itself out in a timely fashion. We're ticking down to the start of the convention here soon. I think that, you know, what's going to happen, obviously, lots of calls are going to be made across the country to leaders of state parties. There needs to be a process that people understand, a process that's transparent, but we need to get on with it. The surest way to lose an election is to show that you're not unified.
The battleground states were slipping away from Joe Biden. It's why some of the many Democrats who asked him to step aside were in that position. Do you think Kamala Harris can make up what was lost in those battleground states? And I guess just in a sentence, do you think she can beat Donald Trump?
Oh, I have no doubt whatsoever she can beat Donald Trump if she gets the support of the party, if the dollars and the donors are there. And she's able to engage with those state parties, those state leaders, particularly in the swing states, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Georgia. You've got to get those folks geared up and excited. And then if I think she can do that, there's clearly a pathway to win. Donald Trump, every single day, gives a whole file of opposition research to the other side of why he is unfit to be president. So it's just a question of Democrats unifying behind a strong choice and getting out there and voting like our lives depend on it, because they do.
Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson thanked President Biden, writing, "Chicago is grateful for his leadership and service. Today, President Biden cemented his legacy as the rare leader who puts the people above himself. It is vital for our entire party to come together and support Vice President Kamala Harris." The mayor went on to say he gives her his full endorsement. She's already broken barriers. Now Kamala Harris could soon become the first Black and Asian American woman to head a major party's presidential ticket after President Biden ended his re-election bid today. Black voters are a core group for the Democratic Party. More specifically, Black women have been credited with helping propel Biden to the presidency in 2020. Our Shardaa Gray spoke to some West suburban residents about how women could play a vital role in securing Harris's spot on the ticket.
I'm Shardaa Gray in Oak Park, where we spoke to residents, specifically women, who say they're ecstatic knowing that Vice President Kamala Harris is the leading contender.
It's fantastic news. I feel like such a sense of relief. Love Joe Biden. He's done a great job. It was time to move on, and I love it that he passed the torch to Kamala.
I think that is a good choice. Kamala is smart. I feel she can handle the job.
Black women have been carrying the Democratic Party for years. To have us finally be able to vote for a Black woman, I just cannot wait till this election.
Young girls who are sitting at home and they see this, they know that it is attainable. And that's what we really want them to know, that there is no glass ceiling and you can do whatever you want to do in this world.
Some residents say it will be a task for Vice President Kamala Harris to beat former President Donald Trump, but they believe they have the numbers. Reporting in Oak Park, Shardaa Gray, CBS News, Chicago.
Well, the big challenge in this election, we've heard a lot about it, winning the swing states. And our Marie Saavedra is in Kenosha, Wisconsin for us tonight. Hi, Marie.
Hi, Joe. Yeah, we came here not only because Wisconsin is just in the wake of the RNC, but because it is firmly in place as a swing state. And I really saw that reflected in the voters who I spoke with today when it came to their reaction to this news. It really ran the gamut. And we saw those same themes in the numbers. CBS News has recent polling for the state of Wisconsin. It posted about a week ago, July 14th. It had President Biden with 49% of the likely vote in this state, former President Trump with 51%. And talking to voters about the president's decision to drop out and then support Vice President Harris, I came away feeling that there hasn't necessarily been any kind of seismic shift in their thoughts about this race, and there is still plenty of uncertainty.
I didn't hear it till just now.
And your reaction?
I don't know. I think Kamala might be better.
I think everyone was kind of expecting it because of all the issues of the possible cognitive decline.
Better late than never to do it now rather than succumb to the fact that he is too old to run. But now it's changed, the whole dynamics changed.
I mean, I'm sure everyone would love to have the first female president of the country, but at the same time, with everything that's happening and all the discourse, I don't know.
I like Joe Biden as a president, but Kamala Harris is basically the same thing because they're from the same party.
Well, you know, the thing is, we don't know for sure that Kamala is going to be the one. And that's a big question mark in my mind. But I'm hopeful that we can make this good news instead of bad news. Right now, it feels kind of bad.
Vice President Harris will be back in Wisconsin on Tuesday. She already had a campaign event in the books for Milwaukee. So now all eyes turn again to that city. What will we hear from her? Will that be the first time we hear from her? What will this new campaign look like at that event? Interesting, Joe, that just a few days after the RNC, again, the spotlight back on Milwaukee, this time with plenty of Democratic voters watching.
Yeah.
We are live in Kenosha. Marie Saavedra, CBS News, Chicago. Joe.
With lots of questions as well. Marie, thanks very much. Live for us in Kenosha tonight. Former President Barack Obama's statement says, in part, Joe Biden has been one of America's most consequential presidents, as well as a dear friend and partner to me. I also know Joe has never backed down from a fight. For him to look at the political landscape and decide that he should pass the torch to a new nominee is surely one of the toughest in his life, but I know he wouldn't make this decision unless he believed it was right for America. Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi released a statement saying, in part, President Joe Biden is a patriotic American who has always put our country first. His legacy of vision, values, and leadership make him one of the most consequential presidents in American history. With love and gratitude to President Biden for always believing in the promise of America and giving people the opportunity to reach their fulfillment. Not lost in either of those statements was the fact that there was not an endorsement for Kamala Harris included. We'll set that aside for now and bring in our political analyst, former head of the Illinois Republican Party, Pat Brady, who stood me up today on our swim in Lake Michigan, but I'll let you go, all right? I guess you had other more important things to do, right?
Like sleep.
Like sleep, that's true. We had to make up. All right, so we haven't talked today yet, Pat, but last week we sure did a lot about this very thing. And you thought, as most, I guess, who are commenting today, that this was just an inevitability.
Yeah, the Biden campaign ended a minute into that debate a month ago, and it was just time. It probably, too bad it didn't happen quicker for the Democrats, but I think the good news for the Democrats is they're going to be front and center, and they're going to steal all the news for the next month going into their convention. That's why I know people want to do this early roll call. Man, if it were me, I would stretch this out and do a rousing roll call vote if they can all get unified behind the vice president and just do a big roll call vote here in Chicago and roll out of that convention with a lot of momentum.
So you probably heard late this afternoon there was talk that Joe Manchin, the West Virginia senator, was considering re-registering as a Democrat after registering as a Democrat, or as a Democrat after switching to independent in December of last year, I think it was. I'm sure there are a lot of Democrats who are thinking there is no way I can envision a Biden-Harris delegate voting for Joe Manchin, but what does his potential insertion? It's the only name we've heard so far, right, is potentially taking on Kamala Harris for this nomination.
Yeah, and remember, the people that are going to make the decision here are the delegates. These are the real party loyalists, like the people we saw last week up in Milwaukee, hardcore party loyalists, and they're not going to be too open, I don't think, to somebody that's left the party and declared themselves independent and took a lot of votes that Democrats don't really care for. So I don't think he has any play there. I think it's the most interesting thing here is as you discussed before, the vice president, with Governor Pritzker being in the mix, Governor Beshear, Gretchen Whitmer. That will be a really interesting pick. But in the next couple of days, we're going to see if anybody's going to surface and actually try to challenge her. It doesn't feel that way right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody does.
You mentioned the VP pick, Pat. You and I talked a lot in Milwaukee about J.D. Vance and his value added to the Republican ticket, and that is directly in those states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. During the convention, there were speakers who addressed that head on, and they, I think, feel like he helps them in those states. How does Harris's selection counter that potentially?
I'm not sure how much that's not overstated. I think that the bigger issue is going to be the difficulty, I think, for the vice president is, and the Republicans started doing this at the convention. I mean, she's got a record. She's not coming in clean. This is the Biden-Harris administration. So she's going to wear a lot of the jacket for the things that people are upset about now. The two major issues being inflation and the border. And she was put in charge of the border. So there's going to be a pretty pointed attack on her. Point is, do the Democrats in this process select somebody that's not part of this ticket? They might be in a better position, notwithstanding the money, to have a kind of a clean break from the past and be the shiny new object, which people apparently are looking for. That being said, I think just her gender is going to put the abortion issue back in play much more than it's been with two 80-year-old men.
Yeah, you just mentioned that, though, and you heard Lori Lightfoot talk about who else has the national exposure that Kamala Harris does. And if you're talking about trying to get to a point where you have a fresh face, I know you told me in Milwaukee that you thought they should go with someone else because, as we saw the signs at the convention, Biden equals failure. And in your opinion, Harris is Biden 2.0.
Yeah, at least I think that's the way some people may feel about it, particularly when dealing with the immigration issue, which she was in charge of. Another thing, too, that people haven't mentioned, and listen, I've got a healthy respect for the vice president. She's a very accomplished woman, but she did not do very well when she was on the national stage campaigning for herself. And that was the thing that people were waiting for during the Iowa caucuses, to see how she would perform. And she did not perform well. In the first 2 years of her vice presidency, there were a lot of gaffes and kind of silly statements. And again, she's got to prove herself to be a better national candidate, I think, if she wants to beat, the Trump machine that they've got going now. So we'll wait and see. But I'll be interested to see. She's going to have to keep it together here for 8 weeks. She's going to have a good debate performance. She's going to have to get the Democrats unified. She's got a lot to do, but she does get a big boost having all that money available to her right from the get-go.
I know we talked, Pat, about how a majority of people didn't want Trump or Biden, and neither party listened, I guess you could argue, although the Republicans did go through the primary process, and the Democrats did too, and ended up with Joe Biden. But you were backing Nikki Haley, which would have been another interesting twist had that happened. I think you felt she would have done better against Biden. But now we're in a position where it looks like it's going to be Harris and Trump. Do you think Trump still wins as you did before this?
Well, I don't know. Right now it's advantage Trump, but you got to today, as we start today, throw all the polling, all the punditry, everything aside. This is a new race, and there hasn't been a whole lot of analysis, except in the last couple of weeks, of how she fares against President Trump. We did see his statement that you read earlier in the broadcast, which I thought was a mistake, to not congratulate Joe Biden, President Biden, but rather attack him. I think that made him look petty, and that's why I think his speech at the RNC the other night made him look petty towards the last 40 minutes of it. So I don't really know. We'll see. But Vice President Harris is going to have to perform and perform well, and she's not going to have a lot of room for error. And she's going to have a strong debate performance. I assume we're still going to have this debate in early September between those two, and that will be something to see.
All right. Pat Brady, as always, thanks for the time and the insight. We'll see you soon. Reaction was swift from some of the president's strongest supporters. Senator Chris Coons of Delaware serves as the campaign co-chair and holds the Senate seat President Biden actually held until he ran for vice president.
I hope today that we can focus on Joe Biden's incredible legacy of service to our nation. 50 years. He has been serving us in the Senate as vice president, as president. And today he's made a very difficult decision in the best interest of our nation to continue serving as president, to continue rolling up his sleeves and tackling the challenges that still lie ahead of us in the next 6 months, but to step aside in terms of the nomination of my party for president in order to make certain that Donald Trump is not returned to the White House. I admire, I respect, I love Joe Biden. I have worked my heart out for him on this campaign. And while this was a very hard decision, I deeply respect how it is a continuation of his lifetime of putting our country before himself.
President Biden took the honorable path today, and he did it for all the right reasons. He did it because he knows that our democracy is on the line. He has such a record to be proud of, everything from the infrastructure bill everyone always talked about, to taking on the pharmaceutical companies, to bringing the world together and strengthening NATO, to bringing back the rule of law and putting in Ketanji Brown Jackson on the Supreme Court. And my heart goes out to him and his family and everything they've done for their country. But he took the honorable path today.
And Senator,
let's bring in now Suzanne Schad, a political science professor at North Central College. It's good to see you, Professor. It's been a little while. We're 29 days away from hosting the DNC here in Chicago. A lot can happen between now and then. Walk us through what we can expect.
So it's interesting that the timeline is expedited, obviously, now that we're more in flux with, of course, who the candidate is going to be. But honestly, things are going to look pretty similar to how they would have looked if Biden were still in the race. The DNC will have a virtual call at the beginning of the month to do their virtual roll call to see where the delegates sit. And if it were Biden in the race, the delegates are not bound to vote for him. And so that doesn't change anything now that he's no longer in the race. The delegates can vote for, in all good conscience is the language, for the candidate that best reflects the sentiments of those that they serve. So they'll get a sense of what that looks like in the virtual roll call, and then we'll get into the convention here in Chicago on the 19th, and we'll do the official vote on the floor. It doesn't really look any different, especially because the party is unifying very quickly just in the past few hours.
Interesting. So this is just a roll call vote. It isn't anything binding. That will actually come during the convention.
That's right. So if this were locked up and let's say we're still Biden and they did the virtual vote, they could then, as a committee, as a Democratic National Committee, the delegates could decide to forego that formal vote on the floor. But and even if with Kamala Harris they're able to get the requisite votes that round to get her over the threshold of delegates, it might still serve the interest of the party to do the official vote on the floor as a sign of unity and excitement about this candidate.
Do you think that there will be anyone who presents, and is it a Democratic, philosophy here to try to coalesce around Harris at this point, have this roll call early so that they start to show these signs of unity?
Yeah, I mean, this is the question: is that are there other candidates that are going to vie for this nomination? There's discussion of is Joe Manchin going to put his hat in the ring? But anyone that we were really thinking might want to be the candidate has already endorsed her, which they should. It is good for the party. It's good for their prospects in November. And quite frankly, because she's the vice president and she's been in the office and has been on the ticket for the voters that voted for the Biden-Harris ticket, she is the right choice to be the nominee, and the party knows that that's the case.
Who do you think is the right nominee for VP, and what goes into that decision and why?
If that's always the question. The data are very clear that whomever's at the bottom of the ticket does not affect the outcome of the election independently. It can get voters more excited about the person at the top of the ticket. But there are a lot of parts of the Democratic Party that are really excited about Kamala Harris now being, or presumptively being, at the top of the ticket. So the question is, who might balance out where she may be somewhat deficient? And that really kind of boils down to, are we a country that will elect a woman? Are we a country that will elect a black woman? And if there are concerns, and there are concerns that that's the case, it is likely, or that may be a push at least, that there is going to be a white man who will be side by side if she is the nominee.
Someone from one of these Midwestern states.
Yeah, we're looking at names like Governor Andy Beshear in Kentucky, Governor Cooper in North Carolina. Are we looking at maybe Josh Shapiro? I would say that we should really be the Democratic Party, and we political scientists are saying senators may not be a smart move in states where they may not be replaced by another Democrat. Probably looking at governors in consideration here.
How does this change the way the Trump campaign moves forward, do you think, from here, Professor?
Well, they've already been teeing it up a bit to be running against Harris. We saw at the convention a lot of Biden-Harris talk. We've already seen Donald Trump and Donald Trump Jr. and Carrie Lake going, tweeting and with other kind of communication, attacking Kamala Harris. We should expect to see similar attacks against her that we saw in 2020, gendered attacks, racist attacks, tropes and stereotypes. Of course, they will take her to task for the Biden policies that they've already been talking about, but we have this extra level here that we really need to be paying attention to.
What do you think we've learned through this process? And I guess it's easy to ask this question after we have arrived at the point we've arrived today. But do you think, even with a sitting president, a party would be wise to go through a primary that would maybe test that candidate's mettle? And we would have maybe seen, had the Democrats done this, just some of the questions that were being raised about Joe Biden later in this campaign. It's awfully late. This has never happened this late.
You're absolutely right, and it feels quite chaotic, but I think that really what's been chaotic has been the past 3 weeks of not knowing what was going on, the public nature of the debate around whether he should run or not. You know, we can talk about whether he should have run in the first place, if he didn't feel he was capable, but we don't have any evidence to suggest that 18 months ago or a year ago he didn't think he was capable, and that this was maybe something that happened relatively in the relative that had just happened, right, relatively quickly. And so I don't know that we could have been prepared for this. I don't know that Joe Biden would have made a different decision, and it's not the party's decision. This was Joe Biden's decision to exit the race.
So I'm curious, as a professor, what your students are saying about all this. Obviously, you haven't been able to talk to them since the announcement today, but I'm sure you've talked about the possibility of this and the historic nature of this. I mean, LBJ, when he pulled out in '68, it was after New Hampshire, as I recall. It's never happened this late. What are they saying, and where are these young voters? Because not many of them are voting.
No, and you know what's interesting as well, we are in summertime. I've talked to quite a few students today who've reached out in various ways that are like, oh my gosh, what's going on, and what should we think, and what should we do, and we wish we were in class, because they're excited and they're interested. And it's not necessarily they're more excited about one candidate or the other, but they're engaged. They're more engaged than we give them credit for. And I think as I go into August, when I'm back in classes with them, which starts right before the convention, that's really the conversation to be had, is let's get excited. What's going to get you to vote? What do you need to hear? What can get you motivated? And while chaotic, people are paying attention, and that's really what we need.
Based on what you've seen today, is there any doubt in your mind that Kamala Harris will be the nominee?
You know, it's a great question. I hate to prognosticate, but I've been, thinking about this for a couple of weeks, that for so many reasons, I think it's very unlikely that she is not accepting that nomination in the Chicago stage in August. For various reasons, some of which we've already talked about, and has been reported that she is showing herself to be the candidate that's unifying the party quickly and energizing parts of the base that were not energized by Joe Biden. It's a tough race against President Trump. It would have been tough for Biden as well, but I would be very surprised if she is not the one accepting that nomination in Chicago next month.
Suzanne Chott from North Central College. It's always good to catch up with you. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe. Take care.
You too. Well, the name has already been changed on the campaign fund filings with the Federal Election Commission. The Biden-Harris campaign, now the Harris campaign. This officially gives the vice president control of nearly $100 million in campaign cash. And if there's ultimately a different Democratic nominee, that candidate would have a harder time getting access to those funds. Democrats were warned about the president's decision in an emergency meeting of senior National Committee members earlier today. But as CBS News presidential historian Douglas Brinkley noted, momentum had been building since that debate.
People were saying something's got to give. It's been a steady drumbeat of disillusioned delegates and donors in the Democratic Party. But I think things started escalating after each performance President Biden did. He didn't seem to be up to snuff. I know it seems minor when you happen to make a mistake of calling, switching out Zelensky and Putin. But when Biden did that at NATO, the media culture that we live in will keep reinforcing it. So people remember Biden at the very end here did the right thing getting out. Kamala Harris is his. He had the bravery in 2020 to choose her. They had won 80 million people were for Biden-Harris. Now it's going to be Harris with Joe Biden serving as her coach.
Here's a live picture from Washington. The race for the White House taking a dramatic turn this afternoon. We'll have more reaction on what's ahead coming up on CBS News Chicago at 10. Right now, we do want to get you caught up on some other local headlines. A 7-year-old boy is in the hospital after he was shot in the head on the Dan Ryan Expressway. Illinois State Police say a person was driving on I-94 near 73rd Street around 2:30 this morning when someone in another vehicle started shooting at them, hitting the boy. We're learning more about the fiery motorcycle crash that left one man dead on the Edens Expressway last night. Illinois State Police say a man on a motorcycle crossed onto a ramp as a person in a white Prius was driving down the ramp. The motorcycle clipped the back of the car and caught fire. The driver later died. This happened around 8:15 last night, again on I-94 near Lake Avenue. We still don't know the condition of the person in the car. Tomorrow, authorities plan to release body camera footage of the fatal police shooting of 36-year-old Sonia Massey. Massey was shot in the face by a Sangamon County Sheriff's deputy after she had called 911, concerned about a possible intruder in her Springfield home. The body cam video release was pushed back after officials consulted with Massey's family. Sheriff's Deputy Sean Grayson was fired and has been charged with murder. Emergency crews were called to Illinois Beach State Park to rescue a swimmer for the second time this month. This was the scene in Zion last night. The fire department arrived around 8 p.m. after reports of a 26-year-old man struggling to stay afloat. Divers found him, rescued him about 2 hours later. He was taken to a nearby hospital. His condition is unknown at this point. Earlier this month, though, also near Zion, a 15-year-old girl died after she was found in the water unresponsive. Let's take a live look outside right now, and a chance for showers on the way tonight. Meteorologist Mary Kay Kleist is here with the first alert forecast for us. Hi, Mary Kay.
Well, hi, Joe. We see a few scattered showers near the Wisconsin line, near McHenry County. They're kind of dying out, though, as we lose our daytime heating. So they're sliding closer to La Crosse and the Quad Cities, kind of moving out. So tonight we dry out, partly cloudy, 65 for the overnight low. We are tracking pop-up showers tomorrow afternoon, but a more organized storm threat coming for the middle of the week. That's Tuesday night into Wednesday. But boy, does the heat build this weekend. We're talking highs, 85 to 90 degrees for daytime highs. So your Monday may start out with those extra clouds, and then in the afternoon we'll see a few showers pinwheel their way through the Chicago area. About a 20% chance that we'll see that pop-up shower chance, most of it coming with the heat of the afternoon. It's kind of like an instability shower, much like we saw today near the Wisconsin line. Midweek, though, we watch that front come through. Storm chances building Tuesday into Wednesday. Then we start clearing out on Thursday. That's the only cool day, because as we reach for next weekend, we're talking some big time heat. Should be dry, but super steamy. 85 next Saturday and 90 on Sunday. Joe?
Thanks, Mary Kay. Recapping our breaking news, President Joe Biden has dropped out of the race for White House, saying it has been the greatest honor of his life to serve as president. And he quickly endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris to succeed him as the nominee and urged the country to unite behind her. Former President Donald Trump took to social media to criticize President Biden, saying he's not fit to serve now and should resign immediately. That is our time for now. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Joe Donlon. Have a great evening. We will see you for the CBS News Chicago at 10. While we're away, keep it right here for updates throughout the night on CBS News Chicago. We'll see you soon.
on Vice President Harris's chances. You're streaming CBS News 24/7.
Coming up, our series. Wait a minute, Tom, is that you working the camera?
Keep cleaning out of your close-up.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.